Danilo Cavalcante was captured after 13 days of running through cornfields and heavily wooded areas like this in Pennsylvania. He got out of prison by crab walking up a wall in a jail in Chester, Pennsylvania. Who is this guy?
People are starting to call this guy like the Weenie Houdini and Spider-Man and Avenger Man, and like, who is he?
Danilo Cavalcante, just one more in a long stream of true crimes, or has society, has Pennsylvania, learned a lesson? What are the lessons?
Hi, I'm Lainey Law.
Hi, and I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
We're here with Doug Cope to discuss Danilo Cavalcante and what happened with Pennsylvania. And did they learn anything? How are you doing today, Doug?
Very good, very good. I especially like that nickname. What was that? The Weenie? That's pretty good. Very creative.
Yeah,
that was from
what they said. Were they saying 5 feet? I believe he was a
5 feet
small,
tall.
very agile, smaller than me, probably a lot more athletic from those moves he was pulling too.
I remember when I was a little kid, little kid, I could actually put my hands on either side of the hallways. The hallways upstairs in our house were so small, I could shimmy up. But I was a little kid then, and I think I probably weighed 80 pounds. So I am shocked that an adult male could do that. So,
well, you have to, let's see some pictures of that too.
Okay. Okay. All right. Take a look at this. There he goes.
There he is. All right.
There he goes. Now that guy on the right.
Yeah, that's a good question. What's he doing?
Is that just a random guy, or was he a lookout?
He's got a lot of tats.
He looks like he's paying attention. I guess he does leave. Now, my next question, too, is this going to be sparking the Danilo challenge on, TikTok with people trying to climb up walls like that?
Good.
Please.
That's a very good question.
I don't want to get in trouble by spurring that on. I mean,
we just started at the new TikTok trend. The people.
Well, this guy apparently was, we said is 5 feet tall, the Weenie Houdini. That was apparently the perfect size for that particular that's an outside hallway that he was in, some kind of access into the prison. And it looked like that guy on the right was he a lookout, or was he just standing there?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I don't get that you can just climb up a wall. I mean, if you came to my house and shimmied up a wall, you'd end up on a roof, and you couldn't go any further. So I don't get that he was able to shimmy up and somehow there was nothing there. Really?
Well, yeah, there was probably nothing there because it was outside. Now, how he got to that point, I don't think we know. But and I'm hoping now that after all this has happened, there is something up top there, even if it's just some kind of metal fencing, because he was able to crab walk up that wall and get onto the roof of the prison that he was in, and then escape. And he also was able to shimmy through some razor wire that had been put up fairly recently. Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah, there it is.
Razor wire.
That's the jail. That's the jail that he was in, that he got out of.
Yeah. Now, I assume too, because of his size being small, that also helped him get through that razor wire. And again, somebody who's 6'5" wouldn't be able to crab walk up that wall like that. And also without wire cutters, which, I hope he didn't have. How would he get through that razor wire? So, and you would also think too, this was I've read a medium security prison.
Yes.
Like a county jail.
Exactly. Yeah. He had just been convicted the week before. The week before he had been convicted, and they had not moved him yet to the new facility, which he was going to be moving to. Now he's here, but he wasn't there yet. He's now being held at in Mass. We call them the Mass Correctional Institutions in Pennsylvania. They call it the SCI. This was
and is that the Bill Cosby Memorial Prison?
This is in Phoenix, Pennsylvania, in Montgomery County. This is where he is expected to serve his life sentence. And yes, it's a fairly new prison. It was only completed in 2018. And yes, it did once house the famous Bill Cosby before his appeal went through. So,
Well, you can bet there's better security at this prison than the one he was being held in before. And one would hope after this happened that corrections officials are going to take steps to make sure something like this can't happen again by putting, some kind of fencing over the top so that some other 5-foot guy or woman wouldn't be able to crab walk up the wall and get out again.
well,
Yeah, I
Doug,
was
you
gonna
have
say, like, how do they even? You gotta, you gotta 5 foot proof that place.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
have towers up there. Just have someone with like a taser, like in a little
well, Doug, you have a lot more.
tower.
You have a lot more. You have a lot more faith, Doug, in government than I do. As you know, I have very little faith.
Yes.
There had been a guy that had tried to escape from that jail back in May of 2023. And after he did his escape attempt, the state of Pennsylvania, with the millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars as a former PA taxpayer
Yes.
spend, they didn't have anybody bright enough on staff. So they had to hire a consultant, and the consultant came in and said, well, just put up some razor wire and this will never happen again. Just give me my check. And he walked away. So what you're saying is they're going to do that again. They're going to hire a consultant, and the consultant will come in and collect a whole bunch of money from the
I
taxpayer.
would hope common sense should reign supreme here. And, if you look at, gee, that's how the guy got out, I guess we better figure out how he's not going to get out again. So I would hope they didn't need to hire a consultant again to
Like
figure
round
that out.
three.
But
I don't know. Maybe it
who
takes
knows?
3 tries.
Who
Well,
knows?
right after he was caught, let's take a look at what officials said. The officials were really at wit's end.
He is going to be looking for a means to sustain himself. He's going to need clothing. He's going to need food, and just to get in and out of the weather. It's pretty hot out there. I'm sure he's looking for some better shelter. So for a lot of reasons, we would be concerned about where he might hide.
That's the dog that finally got him.
Yoda.
Hit him on the head. Well, that's what they're trained to do,
Looks very happy. He's ready for a job well done.
That is Yoda the
Pause
dog.
Yoda. Now, this guy was really, as you know, he was at large for almost 2 weeks. I believe it was 13 days.
Yes.
And and this was a heavily wooded area. It was very hot. And I read that this guy, Mr. Cavalcante, Cavalcante, also even took steps to cover up his
Fecal matter.
as he, did his business in the woods. So actually thought about this, even, he was a desperate guy. He was being held for first-degree murder. He knew he was going to be in jail the rest of his life anyway. So he did just about anything he could think of to keep going.
It's crazy though, like, because he was there for a week. He figured out he could crab walk out. He escapes, and then he knows to bury his poop. Like,
Yes.
maybe I'm just not criminal minded enough, but that's, high key a little bit of a genius. Still got caught. Like, we're glad for that, but those are things that nobody would even think of. And I mean, look at this. It's like you have how many hundreds of people looking for him, and it's like,
Yeah, they
dog.
had about 500 people, I read, in total. 500 searchers with planes and heat-seeking devices and dogs and drones. And still, this guy was pretty good. And apparently, at one time as well, some of these searchers were only within yards of him, and he was hiding in the brush, and they were maybe 5 yards away from him and went right past him. That's basically what he said after he was caught.
Yeah, and the other thing is that when he initially got out, it was the very last day of August and the first couple of days of September, and it was very hot those first days, and they did bring in dogs at that time, but the dogs that they had at that time had heat stroke. One of them even
Ugh.
had to go to the veterinary clinic
Yeah.
for treatment. So it was just too hot for the animals at that time, and they had to wait till it cooled down. The technology that did finally get him on his last night was the infrared technology from an airplane.
Yep.
And that doesn't also really work so well when it's that hot outside. So the weather was not with the police officers during their search, even after that last night when they suspected him from the heat sensing technology. There was a lightning storm and the plane had to go down and land.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
lucky he didn't do something. My theory, not knowing, but my theory is that Mr. Cavalcante thought that people on the outside would help him. He went to a couple of doors and knocked on the doors. The ring cameras caught him, but nobody wanted to help him.
Yeah, apparently they were acquaintances of him, not real friends.
Oh,
Apparently
right.
people he had worked with previously, including one of them that had that ring camera at the front door. But he also managed to steal a dairy van from a dairy farm, and fortunately that van ran out of gas. You know, otherwise he'd probably be in Canada, drinking homogenized milk.
Well,
But,
when you're on the run, you can't really use your credit card. I mean, you can't just go
Yeah.
to the gas station and use your credit card that says Danilo Cavalcante, although I'm sure you didn't have one.
Yeah,
And
I hope he didn't have one.
Ah!
You know,
And one of the theories was that he was going, once he found a gun and got that gun, there was a theory that he might do a carjacking
Yeah.
or a hostage situation. And people are really lucky that, that did not happen, because that's a really rural area, Pennsylvania. I think, Doug, you're a little bit familiar with that area. I am. I
Yes.
grew up in the next county over in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and the road to the airport went right through there. Longwood Gardens was a place that a lot of people went to. We passed there on the way to the airport, so I'm very familiar with that area. And it's very rural. It's extremely rural. It's like nothing
Yeah.
we see in Greater Boston or Southern New Hampshire.
Well,
Uh,
we talked about this before about him getting that gun. It was a 22 caliber rifle with a scope and a flashlight, and he had broken into somebody's garage, and that rifle was just leaning up in a corner in that garage, and he just grabbed it and ran off. The owner of the garage was shooting at him as he was running away and missed him. But in Massachusetts, for instance, yeah, I know. In Massachusetts, you can't just have a rifle leaning up against the side of your garage. Even when you have a gun at home, it is supposed to be in a locked case where someone else can't gain access to it other than you. So at least in Massachusetts, I know, as you said, Pennsylvania, a little bit different, especially out in the rural areas. And sure enough, something like that is perhaps very difficult to enforce. But I know here in Massachusetts, he really shouldn't have had access to that rifle as he did in this particular case.
Well, two things about that. One, knowing that this guy was on the run, that guy was an idiot to be standing there
Yeah,
in his
that's a good
garage.
point.
Again,
Right.
he knows that. I mean, this is on every TV, radio, YouTube, however you get your news. You would have to have been living in a cave not to know that this guy, a killer, was on the loose in Pennsylvania. So to have a gun just sitting there in his garage was crazy. But I will say this, having grown up in that area, I mean, look at the background that guy's pointing to. The background is that it's very rural.
Yes.
When I grew up in Lancaster and Lebanon counties, you would go to Boy Scouts and you would go to church or wherever, and people would have a gun rack full of hunting guns because it's state game lands. And at this time, I believe deer season is about ready to start. Hunting is very common. My family didn't hunt, but we knew lots of people that hunted. They would bring samples of venison to church and give them to us. So it's in the middle of a very rural area. It's in the middle of the Pennsylvania state game lands. People should be careful.
Well,
but I mean, that's just a hobby down there, and it's a way of life for people.
My daughter used to be a teacher in Pennsylvania, and the Monday following Thanksgiving was a holiday. because it was the first day of the hunting season.
I remember that as a kid growing up. Yes, because
You don't get that in Massachusetts.
well, and you and I both lived in Western Mass for a little bit, and it's a little bit
Yes.
different down there. Although it's nowhere near as rural as it is in Pennsylvania. Western Massachusetts is nowhere near as rural. But all right, I've got a couple of questions going forward.
Yes.
Because a lot of people have covered this case, and one of the questions I have is, how is it that this guy got out of the jail in the first place? But second place, that one little scrappy little guy, 5 foot, 120 pounds, was able to stay on the loose for almost 2 weeks. And there were 400 plus police officers running around looking for him. I don't care if it's
Well,
woods.
the guard who was supposedly they missed him for an hour. He was undetected for an hour after he got out of jail. And the guard who was on duty then has been fired for what good that does now. But yeah, that guard has been fired. So,
He had you're not supposed to have your cell phone in the tower. And he did. You're supposed to be paying attention. I think they said that jail had 130 some odd security cameras. Well, what good are they if nobody's watching them?
Right, exactly. So obviously one would hope that without yet another consultant, they would have solidified what guards are supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. And maybe you need a guard to check up on the guards.
Maybe you need 2 guards. Like in most commercial airliners, you've got to have a pilot and a co-pilot, or I guess now they call it a captain and a first officer, but you've got to have 2 people in that cockpit just so they're watching each other, or in case one of them has some medical issue and the other guy is watching. Why can't the state of Pennsylvania, with all that's at stake here, why can't they have 2 people in the tower?
Well, hopefully they do now. Hopefully they learned from this.
I don't know.
The way that I think about it, my theory, hear me out. This person played a lot of a game called Metal Gear.
Now, how do you know that?
Metal Gear, decades old. Maybe you guys have heard of it. A lot of it is infiltrating like military bases, getting past hundreds of guards, sneaking past hundreds of cameras. This guy, he's been trained.
Do you know that for a fact, or is that your theory?
I'm teasing.
No, I don't.
It's almost unreal. It's unreal how he managed this. I was like thinking it's like the dogs are passing out from heat exhaustion. It's like you have this one person running through like on foot is just like Hunger Gamesing it up.
Although you do have to admit, okay, how that jail was probably an older jail, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how old, but yeah.
So, okay. So, yeah, I don't either. But think if this was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Yep.
This same thing could have happened. And back then, you would not have had infrared heat-seeking materials or equipment. You would not have had drones.
Yeah.
You would not have had a lot of the equipment that was used to track this guy down. And even with that, it took 2 weeks. Can you imagine if this had happened like 40 years ago and that guy had escaped? Maybe he could have safely made his way to Canada.
Well, I'm gonna object to that supposition, because I think the difference is 40 years ago, people paid attention to their jobs. There were no cell phones that people had that they were, obsessed with. I mean, people, it's happened twice this week in southern New Hampshire that people drove into buildings. Hart's Turkey Farm, the landmark.
Oh, no. What happened there?
Somebody drove into it and 2 people were injured. One of them had to go to the hospital. I don't know what happened.
No.
Yes.
I've been there in years past. Yes, Hart's Turkey Farm.
What I'm trying to say is that in years past, people paid attention to their driving and paid attention to their jobs. Now, people are just so obsessed with their electronic stuff that, I think that the guard was remiss. I think a lot of I don't want to, say anything bad about the cops, but I think years ago, people were, they had what is called seriousness of purpose. And so I question whether the guy would have gotten out in the first place. And second of all, I think it was more, we have technology, but does it make us smarter? It gives us more information, but it doesn't give us wisdom. So I'm going to argue with you and say no.
Okay.
First of all, I don't think it would have happened 40 years ago. And second of all, I think, now the police have so many regulations, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, watched and monitored and do the right thing, but they have so many regulations. They don't want to step outside of the headquarters without checking the book and making sure, oh, geez, what's the regulation on this? Oh, we have an escapee here. Paragraph 3, subsection 4. Am I allowed to go after him, or do we let him? So I'm thinking that with all this wonderful technology that we have, is it helping us with our seriousness of purpose, or is it just distracting us and making us stupider?
Well, let me go get my dial telephone and we'll figure this out.
Yeah, the rotary
By
phone.
the way, no way. Have you seen? You can find rotary phones in antique shops sometimes. They're like $60.
Yeah.
They're not
They're
cheap,
novelty. You want them?
and you can't use them. So
Retro.
No, I have a push button phone upstairs. I never took it off the wall. It hasn't been connected for years, but I don't want to pull it off the wall and have a hole there.
I mean, the way to think about it too is just even like, hundreds of years ago, I don't know if I want to say thousands, but it's like calculus has been around for how long? And that's before people even had electric calculators. I like have ChatGPT, Google, everything at my disposal, and I'm still pulling my hair out.
yeah.
So what about the dog? I think it was fantastic that they, with all the technology we're talking about, the infrared and, all the rest, it was a dog that in the end captured him. Apparently, the infrared from the sky found what they believed to be him, and they sent the officers in and they surrounded him.
Yep.
But he was still fighting. Apparently, he still tried to get away with his .22 caliber long gun, and it was the dog that ran in and stopped him. So,
Yep. Well, that's what they're trained to do. And those Belgian Malinois, they're kind of like a short-haired German Shepherd kind of thing, and they're specially trained. I had my first dog actually had some Belgian Malinois in her, as a matter of fact. And they're very smart and they're easily trained, but they're also very strong.
Right.
And this one was 4 years old, I believe was.
Yes, 4 years old.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, they're trained to go in and get their man or woman to subdue them. So fortunately, the dog was able to do the job that the other guys couldn't.
Well, the other thing about those dogs is that they're people dogs. They need to be close to people. They need a lot of activity. They're not good house dogs, because if you just go to work during the day and let it sit there, that's not good for that particular breed of dog. So it was a great dog. They had other dogs and they needed with all the technology, they needed the weather, which they got. But going forward, what do you think law enforcement has learned from this? Do you think that, jailers around the country will now take a look and see? I mean,
well, one would hope so. I mean, this just generated so much interest nationwide and worldwide too, for that matter. The weenie Houdini. One would hope that corrections officials throughout the country might take a look at some of this and kind of think about what's going on with their jails. I mean, here in Massachusetts, I don't know if you remember Walpole State Prison.
I've been there.
Yeah, well, it's closed.
Yeah.
It's closed down now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've taken it offline and they're moving all the prisoners to other facilities. So there's a lot of rethinking, I think, going on in the corrections departments. And of course, also people aren't being arrested for a lot of things these days.
I was just going to say, you're right. There's a lot of rethinking, but is the rethinking going in the correct direction? I mean, there's been a lot of quote unquote bail reform, but a lot of that is, well, we don't want to throw these people in jail because that doesn't really do any good for them. We need to keep them in the community as much as we can, and we need to reduce the amount of time that they spend in jail. So I think that you're right that there's been a lot of change, but I don't know if the change has been in the right direction.
Yeah. With all of these officers being deployed and everything, how much Dunkin' Donuts coffee do you think was consumed?
Honestly, they get discounts. I used to work at Dunkin'. Officers get discounts. They were getting those boxes of Joe.
Well, yes, big boxes of Joe. There we go.
In Pennsylvania, they probably went to Wawa. That's
Wawa.
That's the convenience chain in
Yes, or
southeastern Pennsylvania is
Sheets.
Wawa or Sheets. Sheets is big. Be careful how you say that. It's
Oh, I know.
Sheetz.
EETZ.
When I
Sheets.
was a kid, I actually went to school with a member of the Sheets family. It's a little
Oh, I
piece of
didn't realize
trivia.
that was actually somebody's name.
Well, yeah, Sheetz. It's a name
Well, I
in
guess.
Pennsylvania.
I just thought maybe they were, taking a
Nope.
Sheets name and putting a Z at the end or something.
Nope. So yeah, I'm kind of familiar with that area and with the type of land that it is. Now, this guy that we're looking at now, he has a really good YouTube channel called JLR Investigates, and I have to thank him because he is the fellow that said yes, you have permission to use the video. So I just wanted to let you guys know that
Oh, nice.
I just didn't pick up the video from wherever. And Lainey, thank you. Downloaded it for me because I'm not the most adept at all that kind of stuff. And then
You're getting there.
well, I'm trying, but anyhow, so the other question I really had, and that's long term, and that is, how there's so much true crime. I mean, the Murdoch trial, which might be like whack-a-mole coming back up again. There's Brian Kohlberger. There's the little girl in Manchester, New Hampshire, who disappeared, and her father is coming up for trial. There's just so much true crime that is America just going to forget this? Will it just go into the wayside?
Probably because all the excitement about this was the search and not the crime itself.
Right.
So, are you familiar? Now, there is a crime here in Massachusetts that you're probably familiar with. The woman who is accused of killing her boyfriend, who was a Boston police officer.
Oh, yeah.
That happened. I believe it's Karen Reed.
That happened on the South Shore, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the defense is saying that she was set up and, that the prosecution has basically made up the whole story. And outside of every court appearance, there are people with signs supporting her. I mean, it's been pretty amazing to watch. And
is that part of the anti-police sentiment that's pretty much taken over lately, though?
Well, I don't. Maybe the district attorney in that particular area, Mike Morrissey in Norfolk County, did issue very unusual. Issued a video statement even before the trial, urging people to stop this, to cut it out. That there's no collusion between departments that have been alleged, and it's really an amazing case to look at. In fact, you may want to do a video on this in the future.
When is that coming up for trial?
They just set the trial date. I believe the trial date is next March.
Well, we'll have to watch for that. The other one that I'm interested in that's coming up fairly soon is the little girl Harmony Montgomery that just disappeared. And her father was convicted on gun charges recently, and he denied any wrongdoing with respect to the death of his daughter. But the New Hampshire Attorney General keeps very tight-lipped about these things. So we're all expecting fireworks, or at least the disclosure of a lot of facts that we're unfamiliar with on that. So there's just so much of it. There's just so much true crime. I mean, I'm not really a YouTuber, but doing these podcasts now, as Lainey knows, I've started watching a lot of YouTube and studying what goes on. And I guess what they call the trending page, once you watch a certain niche of stuff, they feed you stuff. And every day there's more and more and more true crime. It's just amazing. It's amazing how much there is. And so that's why I'm saying I'll bet this Danilo Cavalcante thing is going to go into the ether. One other little trivia fact, getting back to the case at hand. My understanding is Brazil wants him back really, really badly.
Yes, because he's wanted for a murder there. And in fact, that is supposedly why he was convicted of murdering his girlfriend in this country, because they alleged that she was going to rat him out about the murder in Brazil. So he killed her to keep her from testifying against him.
And I just read, I don't know if it's true or not, but I read someone was reporting that Brazil is so angry that they're going to try him in absentia. They're going to hold a trial. It's upcoming. It's on the schedule, and they're going to try him even if he can't come back. So
I didn't know they could do that? That's insane.
Well, they don't have a constitution like we do. I mean, I didn't mean to say they didn't have a constitution. Our Constitution, the United States, has the Fourth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment and all kinds of other protections. I don't know what they have down there, but I mean, if he doesn't show up, he doesn't show up. And the other question I'll ask both of you, and that is, if you put yourself in the prosecutor's shoes in Pennsylvania. Mr. Cavalcante is coming in for a preliminary hearing on these felony escape charges, and that carries a sentence of, I believe it's only 7 years and a fine of $15,000. There's speculation that they'll throw other charges at him. Do you think they'll throw the other charges at him also?
Well, why not? I mean, he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail anyway. But of course, whatever charges they throw at him and he's convicted of, they're going to run concurrent to his life in prison on the first-degree murder charge.
Oh, Judge Cope,
yeah.
How is it that you know that they would be concurrent? Why wouldn't the judge exercise his discretion and make them consecutive?
Well, they could be, but if you're in prison for life anyway, I mean, you're going to serve after you're dead. I mean,
my theory is, I think the evidence is pretty airtight, but all of these cases get appealed. And so Mr. Cavalcante will have a right to appeal his conviction, and I would guess he'll appeal it. So my guess is that is why the Pennsylvania prosecuting authorities would want to, bring as many other charges against him as they possibly could. Maybe he stole a loaf of bread at the Wawa store, so that while his appeal is pending, they can hold him on these other charges. I mean, I don't know.
Here's another charge. When he was captured, he was wearing a Philadelphia Eagles sweatshirt. So he must have stolen that from somewhere, and right. B, that's besmirching a Philadelphia Eagles fans for him, being able to wear that sweatshirt.
Did you hear what Governor Shapiro said in Pennsylvania? I mean, the guy, I don't live there, so I can say whatever I want about him or anybody else in Pennsylvania.
Until he's a guest.
But if Governor Shapiro wants to be a guest, I'd be more than happy to host him. But he kept a low profile during the whole thing. He kept a really low profile. And in fact, some of the YouTubers were saying, "Where's Governor Shapiro? Where's Governor Shapiro?" And in the very end, at the press conference where the district attorney and the Pennsylvania State Police detectives and heads of all the law enforcement agencies, when they came up, finally Governor Shapiro appeared and said, "What a great state we have that we caught this guy." But then he said about that when the law enforcement people caught Cavalcante, they cut the Eagles sweatshirt off of him, and he said, "If that person comes forward from whom that sweatshirt was taken, I will buy him another nice blue sweatshirt."
Well, isn't that nice?
I almost fell on the floor laughing when I saw that.
I mean, this is a little bit of a hot take, and by a little bit of a hot take, I mean a lot. And maybe this is just a result of watching too many TV shows and cartoons. But it reminds me of this one show recently I saw on Amazon, Invincible, where they take a villain and they have him kind of build an army. It's like, this guy, for all that running, that is such an insane feat where, I agree that he is probably going to end up spending the rest of his life in jail. But as far as things that could be learned from that, I don't know what combat is like. I don't know what hiding out there is like. But that's pretty talented. If we can take him in for research, have him train some people, it's a good thing. But maybe that's just the millennial zoomer in me. That's just rehabilitation. Make him
he should train Army Special Forces.
Exactly.
Yeah. How many people would last one night out in the woods? I know I would be crying to get home to my nice warm bed on my color TV.
I wouldn't make it to the top of the wall. I'd be huffing for breath.
Yeah, that was classic. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. All right. Any closing thoughts, Lainey?
I mean, it's a crazy story. You mentioned it. It's just like, is this gonna last? Like, this is gonna honestly be old news, most likely within a month. We live in such a state where everything comes at you so quick. But I mean, it's impressive. It's fun to watch. It's fun to be involved in. I was a little shocked, I guess, which we didn't touch on, at the cops taking selfies with him after, which
Oh,
obviously
Yes.
it's like, obviously it's a great
Yeah.
feat. It's just like, I honestly, me too, like, look what we finally did. But at the same time, you mentioned like the anti-cop sentiment, and that definitely doesn't help. Obviously, you know, for them it's an accomplishment, and thank you for helping, you know, the community. But I am curious how the public is receiving that image of just, you know, this guy with like a whole squadron of cops all like,
Yeah, it's like those guys were on an African safari and they're posing with a lion, you know, and it's like, yeah, that was a little crazy. But,
yeah.
Well,
but again, it's Pennsylvania.
one of the guys in my office said the same thing, Doug, when it happened. And my response was, well, my first response was, well, you know, this guy just kept 400 law enforcement officers on the run for 2 weeks. And so they're thrilled, they're happy. And the head of the Pennsylvania State Police, you know, when he was asked about that, he said, well, you know, I don't have any problem with it. So I did some being an attorney and trying to, you know, take the levity out of the levity that you two are demonstrating in this very serious matter. I did a little bit of research, and my research yielded the fact that, yes, the civil rights bar said basically that it was unprofessional and it was degrading, but there was no real law or ethical rule. The police, as I said before, they have a big book of rules they've got to follow, and
If
that's
that
not
had happened, if
now.
that had happened in Massachusetts, somebody would have lost their job.
Well, now, to finish the thought, there is a rule in a lot of police places, and I didn't do the research on that, but if they posted that on social media, now they're violating some rules that actually are in their ethical guidelines. But to just take the picture, what the legal community in the civil rights bar is taking a look at now is that this is a watershed moment, and you know, it didn't look good, and it didn't show them as professionals, and it, you know, if you can demean someone that's killed 2 people, they say it demeans someone. So that's an issue that came up really the first time in my observation. Apparently, you know, this is something that does happen, but this is such a high profile case that, you know, all 375 million Americans saw it. And I guess the other, how many people are 4 billion people? So anyhow, thank you for bringing that up, Lainey. That was an issue. I don't see it as a problem, but people do, and it will be pursued in terms of writing more. We don't have enough regulations.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it even for myself, like, it's hard because a part of me is just like, oh, well, it's a little inhumane. This is a person, they're treating him like a trophy or like a deer after a hunt. But at the same time, like you said, like, this is something that they've been working on for days. This is something that they're proud of. So it is a little bit of a nuanced situation. But that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Any thoughts you may have. Again, Doug, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you guys on the next About the Law. Thank you.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.